Lust is a modern weapon, and most men are losing the battle. We live in an era of instant gratification. With just one click, a man can see more flesh than ancient kings could in a lifetime. With a single swipe, he can access more romantic options than his grandfather ever dreamed of. But this abundance comes at a steep, invisible cost: the death of discipline. In a world where pleasure is always within reach, very few men know how to say no. And in that inability to delay gratification, they lose something vital: their power. Because here's the brutal truth no one wants to admit: when intimacy becomes cheap, it becomes a weapon. It no longer connects people, it controls them. Women instinctively sense when a man is ruled by lust. His energy feels frantic, ungrounded, weak. He becomes predictable, easy to manipulate. Not because she's malicious, but because nature itself tests strength. And a man who constantly chases pleasure is signaling loud and clear: I don't lead myself, so someone else can. Most men today are not conquered by external enemies. They are conquered by internal impulses. Lust isn't just a desire, it's a battlefield. And every time you reach for the easy hit, like a video, a meaningless hookup, you surrender just a little more of your presence, your focus, your edge, that sharpness of mind, that clarity of purpose. It dulls when you live on your knees to desire. What Machiavelli never said outright but lived through every principle is this: the man who cannot control himself will inevitably be controlled by others. And nowhere is this more true than in the realm of lust. Because a man who is led by craving is not a leader, he's a servant to every stimulus that enters his screen. He doesn't move with vision, he reacts with hunger. And hunger without control always looks like desperation. Women don't fear lust. They fear men who are owned by it, because those men are dangerous in all the wrong ways: unstable, needy, emotionally reckless. But a man who can feel desire, look it in the eye, and still choose purpose over pleasure, that man becomes unforgettable. He becomes the one who doesn't beg for attention, because his presence alone commands it. This isn't a call to repression, it's a call to transformation. To take your energy and master it, not bury it. To become a man whose fire burns inward, fueling action, not addiction. Because in a world of cheap pleasure and weaker men, the man who can say not yet becomes rare, respected, even feared. And it is that fear, that reverence, that makes him magnetic in ways the world can't explain. This is the first step. Win this battle, and you begin to win your life back. The man who leads his body can't be manipulated by hers. There is a dangerous illusion in the modern world: the belief that desire makes you powerful. That craving a woman, pursuing her, needing her touch, somehow makes you bold or free. But in truth, the man who is ruled by his body is never free. He's enslaved, and it shows. A man who can't say no isn't powerful. He's predictable, and predictable men are easy to control. You think she's flirting? You think she's teasing you just for fun? But beneath the surface, there's something deeper happening. She's testing you, not out of cruelty, but curiosity. She wants to know: are you centered, or are you just pretending to be? Can you hold your ground when the fire gets close, or do you melt the moment desire knocks? Because if your entire sense of purpose disappears the second she enters the room, if your schedule, your goals, your presence all collapse just because she looks good today, you've already lost. You're not leading anymore. You're orbiting her, and no woman respects a man who orbits. She may enjoy the attention, but deep down she sees a follower, not a force. Machiavelli didn't write about seduction directly, but he gave us the law that governs it. He who is ruled by his appetites loses the power to rule others. And this is where most men fall. They don't lose power because someone took it. They gave it away one compromise at a time. A late-night message, a skipped workout, a broken boundary. All because of how she made them feel. But here's the shift: when a man stops reacting and starts leading, everything changes. He doesn't flinch at beauty. He doesn't rush in for validation. He breathes, observes, stays rooted in his code. And that composure, that restraint, it drives her wild in a way desperation never could. You don't need to avoid attraction. You need to master it, to see it, to feel it. and still choose discipline over impulse. When she tries to pull you in with seduction, you meet her gaze and stay unmoved. Calm, focused, unshaken. That's when she feels it. Not lust, but awe. Not control, but respect. Because the man who controls himself is untouchable. Not numb, not cold, just sovereign. So here's the truth. The next time desire rises, don't chase it. Channel it into your mission, into your craft, into your body. Use it to train, build, refine, and let your presence speak louder than your need. Because when a woman sees that you're not reacting to her beauty, you're simply acknowledging it and continuing to lead, she doesn't feel neglected. She feels reverence. And that's what separates a man she uses from the one she follows. This isn't about control over women. It's about control over yourself. And that's the kind of power no one can take from you. The man who doesn't need validation controls the dynamic validation. It's the invisible drug most men don't even realize they're addicted to. They don't chase women, they chase being seen, being wanted, being told they're enough. And this chase slowly erodes the very essence of their masculine power. You see it everywhere. The man who adjusts his style to impress her. The man who posts thirst traps for approval. The man who lights up when she compliments him and dims the moment she doesn't. He believes he's in control, but his need for external affirmation makes him easy to influence, easy to bend, easy to break. This isn't confidence. It's dependence dressed in designer clothes. The man who needs validation is not living by his own standards, he's performing, and performances always require an audience. Without attention, he feels empty. Without praise, he questions his worth. Without her approval, he loses direction. But here's the truth. The man who depends on being noticed will always be manipulated by those who withhold it. Now contrast that with a different kind of man. A man who moves in silence, who doesn't dress to impress but to express, who doesn't flirt to be reassured but stays rooted in who he is. He validates himself through his habits, through his direction, through the quiet confidence that comes from doing the hard things when no one's watching. This man walks into a room and doesn't scan for attention, he observes. He doesn't need the spotlight because he carries one inside him. And that light, calm, clear, grounded makes people turn toward him without knowing why. In relationships, this self-validating man doesn't ask, "Do you still find me attractive?" He doesn't beg for affection. He leads with presence, with consistency, with stillness. And women feel that. They don't see a man who's trying to earn their love. They see a man who is love, who is direction, who is whole with or without them. That's not arrogance. That's sovereignty. Machiavelli once wrote, "He who is feared and respected is remembered longer than he who is loved." In today's world, that translates to this. The man who commands respect through principle will always be more magnetic than the man who performs for approval. So here's your move. Stop trying to impress, start becoming undeniable. Stop asking to be seen, start living in a way that cannot be ignored. Let your values be louder than your words. Let your silence be more commanding than her compliments. Because when a woman senses that you don't need her validation, that your self-worth is locked in non-negotiable, she doesn't lose interest. She leans in, she studies you, she respects you. And that's when you stop chasing the dynamic and start controlling it. The man who transforms lust into magnetic presence. Most men think strength is about lifting heavy things, dominating conversations, or projecting confidence. But true strength, undeniable magnetic strength, is built in silence when no one is watching. It's forged in how you deal with your urges, not in suppressing them, but in channeling them into something higher. Every man feels desire. That's not the issue. The question is, what do you do with it? Weak men collapse into lust. They scroll late into the night, chasing fleeting images and cheap dopamine. They confuse stimulation with connection and pleasure with power. But each click, each indulgence, each surrender chips away at their masculine edge. They wake up the next day unfocused, drained, foggy. They've traded clarity for comfort, and it shows in their posture, their ambition, their energy. They're not addicted to women. They're addicted to escape. But the man who transforms his lust, he's a different creature entirely. He doesn't waste his fire, he wields it. He doesn't run from temptation, he meets it with stillness and redirects it into his mission. When he feels the pull of lust, he doesn't numb himself with distractions. He breathes into the tension. He lets it sharpen him. And that tension becomes fuel. It's the fire behind his eyes. The reason his presence feels charged even when he says nothing. He doesn't have to prove he's confident because every step, every decision, every quiet pause radiates restraint. He's grounded in his body, but he's not owned by it. That's the difference. Machiavelli never romanticized pleasure. He understood its danger. He knew that what comes easily often costs the most. And in today's culture where cheap pleasure is always a tap away, that wisdom has never been more urgent. Because when every other man is burning out from indulgence, the one who holds his fire stands apart. He feels different. He is different. This man trains when others sleep. He builds when others scroll. He speaks less but says more. And women feel that difference. They don't just notice him, they feel the gravity in his presence. Not because he's chasing them, but because he's carrying something real, direction, discipline, focus. And here's the secret, women don't crave a man who's numb to desire. They crave a man who can feel it fully and still choose his purpose first. A man whose fire doesn't consume him, but forges him. That restraint. It's more seductive than any line, any look, any performance. So the next time you feel the urge to chase easy pleasure, pause, sit with it. Let it rise, but don't react. Instead, redirect. Go lift, go right, go build. Let that energy become a signal to the world. I don't run from fire. I walk through it. Because the man who transforms lust into presence doesn't just become attractive, he becomes unforgettable. The man who doesn't need her body becomes the one she wants to give it to. Most men believe intimacy is something to earn. They think if they say the right words, send the perfect message, buy the right gift, or act nice enough, they'll be rewarded with a woman's body. But this belief is backwards. It's not attraction, it's negotiation. And women feel it instantly, because no woman wants to be convinced to open up. She wants to choose to. And she only chooses when she feels the man across from her is already whole, not hungry. You see, most men chase sex out of emptiness. They don't want connection, they want comfort, escape, validation. They need her body to feel like a man. And the more they chase, the less magnetic they become. That's the paradox. The harder they try to prove they're worthy of being wanted, the more invisible they feel. Because women aren't drawn to men who need them. They're drawn to men who choose them selectively, calmly, with grounded clarity. Machiavelli once wrote, "The greatest gift is not to need what everyone else desires." And in the context of lust and relationships, that means this. When you don't need a woman to complete you, she feels safer surrendering to you. Not because she's manipulated, but because she senses your strength, your calm, your lack of desperation. The man who doesn't crave her attention, who doesn't perform for her body, who doesn't orbit around the hope of intimacy, that man becomes powerful in her eyes. Not because he's distant, but because he's full. This fullness is rare. It comes from building a life, not begging for inclusion in someone else's. It comes from vision, from training, from solitude, from becoming the kind of man whose world is already rich and vibrant. So when he invites someone in, it's not out of need, but desire. Here's what that looks like in real life. You feel the pull, you want to text her, call her, get her attention, but instead, you stop. You breathe. You ask yourself, is this desire or dependency? Is this connection? Or just loneliness in disguise? And if you're not sure, you sit with it. You don't act, you don't chase, you lead yourself first. Because the moment you try to earn intimacy, you lose polarity. But when you embody your value, when you let her feel that you're already enough without her, she becomes the one who leans in. She starts to chase what she can't control: your discipline, your calm, your depth. This isn't about manipulation, it's about truth. Real intimacy isn't something you beg for, it's something you attract when your presence says, "I'm already full." You're welcome to join me, but I'll never need you to complete me. And in a world of starving men, that kind of presence isn't just powerful, it's irresistible. The world doesn't test you through battle anymore. It tests you through temptation. We like to imagine that if we lived in another time, an age of war kings and conquest, we'd rise to the occasion. We'd fight with honor, face our enemies head on, and protect what's ours. But in the modern world, that kind of battle is gone. The wars aren't loud anymore. They're subtle, silent, and most men don't even realize they're being tested. Today's war is psychological, and its weapons are softer, distraction, seduction, ease. No swords, no enemies to chase, just screens that numb your ambition, women who reward weakness with attention, and a culture that sells you pleasure as purpose. You're not being asked to fight with your fists. You're being asked to fight with your focus. And most men lose that fight every day alone in the quiet. Not in public, but in the moments when no one is watching. They lose it with every late-night scroll, every dopamine hit, every time they break their word to themselves for something that feels good but leaves them empty. The world doesn't have to take your power anymore. It just offers you enough comfort to forget you ever had it. But Machiavelli's wisdom still applies. The man who cannot rule himself will be ruled. And that rule doesn't come with chains. It comes with cravings, with impulses, with invisible shackles that keep you from ever becoming what you were meant to be. This is your test now. Can you delay pleasure? Can you sit with your hunger and still choose your mission? Can you let the fire burn in you without rushing to extinguish it with fantasy? Because the man who passes that test, who breathes through the tension instead of fleeing from it, becomes something rare. He becomes the man who doesn't just exist, he commands, he chooses, he builds. He's not loud, but his silence has weight. He's not flashy, but his presence is undeniable. He doesn't beg for recognition, he becomes the man others feel the moment he enters a room. So understand, this temptation is no accident. It's the battlefield modern men must walk daily. And while others are losing their edge chasing cheap highs, you have a choice to stand still, to stay grounded, to let the storm pass while you remain rooted in purpose. And in doing so, you don't just survive this new war, you win it. Discipline over lust is the new battlefield. In the past, men were tested in open battlefields, swords drawn, enemies visible. Today, the battlefield is quieter, more deceptive. It doesn't come with blood, but with distraction, with comfort, with endless temptation that looks like reward, but slowly robs you of your power. Because the war now isn't fought with violence, it's fought with indulgence. And most men lose it before they even realize it's happening. They lose it in the silence of their bedrooms at 2 a.m., scrolling for hits of validation they call entertainment. They lose it when they trade an hour of focus for a fantasy that disappears in seconds. They lose it every time they surrender their energy not to something meaningful but to something easy. Lust isn't the enemy, it's a mirror. It shows you what you haven't mastered, and if you don't learn to stand in front of that mirror and remain still, you will break. Because a man who cannot lead his own impulses will always be led by his cravings, by other people's approval, by whatever the world dangles in front of him that feels good but takes everything. Machiavelli didn't fight in the digital age, but he understood the principle: the man who lacks self-control becomes a pawn in someone else's game. And that's exactly what's happening now. Men aren't losing because they're not strong. They're losing because they're distracted, sedated, empty. But you don't have to be. There is a different path, a colder, sharper, more demanding one. It's called discipline. Discipline is the quiet rebellion against a world that profits from your weakness. It's waking up early when no one's watching. It's choosing your mission over a moment of pleasure. It's sitting with your urge and turning it into power instead of escape. Discipline doesn't scream. It whispers, it moves, it builds, it becomes. Every time you feel that fire, the craving to check her page, to send a late-night text, to chase comfort, you're being tested. Not by her, not by society, but by the part of you that's waiting to become dangerous. The man who wins this silent war doesn't look like everyone else. He walks slower, speaks less, thinks deeper. He doesn't need to prove anything because his self-control is louder than his ego. And when he walks into a room, people feel it, not because of his appearance, but because of his presence. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be unbreakable. And that starts with one decision to stop being led by your cravings and start being led by your code. So breathe through the fire, walk through the urge, let temptation sharpen you, not steal from you. Because the man who can delay gratification today becomes the man the world respects tomorrow. This is the new battlefield, and discipline is your weapon. Real power comes from restraint, not reaction. In today's overstimulated world, most men are taught to chase attention, chase intimacy, chase validation. But here's the truth. What you chase owns you. And the more you reach outward, the less control you have inward. The most powerful shift a man can make isn't about becoming more aggressive, louder, or wealthier. It's about becoming more disciplined, more grounded, more sovereign in the way he handles his own desires. Because the man who can feel attraction, temptation, or lust and still choose purpose over pleasure becomes unshakable. This video reminds us that lust in itself is not evil, but when it controls you, you lose clarity. You stop leading your life and start reacting to it. And once you're reactive, you're vulnerable to manipulation, to distraction, to regret. The deeper message is this: restraint is not weakness. In fact, it may be the last real form of masculine strength. When you learn to channel your desire into growth, into your mission, your health, your craft, you become magnetic without chasing, respected without performing, desired without needing to be. So here's the lesson to carry forward. Don't let lust lead you. Let it sharpen you. Use every craving as fuel for your evolution. Let the fire rise, but do not let it consume you. Because when you master your hunger, you no longer beg the world to feed you, you feed yourself. And that kind of man-focused, calm, self-directed isn't just attractive, he's unforgettable.